My name is Rebecca, and I'm 25. Just 48 hours before I was set to submit my graduate thesis, the project I'd poured my soul into for nearly 2 years, my own father slammed my laptop against the side of my head. I felt a warm trickle of blood run down from my temple, while, in the corner of the room, my mother actually laughed. My dad loomed over me, his face twisted in pure fury. "Your future? It's a joke," he snarled. "You don't deserve a future. You're nothing but a parasite." I never thought my fight for an education would end with me bleeding on the dining room floor. If you're watching this, I'd really like to know what part of the world you're in. And if my story connects with you, please consider subscribing and hitting the like button. The path that led me to that moment and what happened after altered the course of my life completely. I was raised in Greystone, a gritty little industrial town where the daily scream of the factory siren was a more reliable timekeeper than any watch. We lived on the town's frayed edge in a small 2-bedroom house whose perpetually peeling paint was a testament to what my father, Arthur, called keeping our priorities straight. He'd spent 27 years at the local steel mill, and his gnarled, calloused hands and the permanent scowl etched on his face were badges of what he called real work. In his mind, education was a waste of time, a frivolous indulgence for people too weak to make a living with their hands. My mother, Eleanor, worked part-time as a waitress at the town diner, but her real job was maintaining the household precisely to my father's standards. She had figured out early in their marriage that disagreeing with Arthur led to either a suffocating wall of silence or a storm of shouting. Over the years, she had molded herself into his perfect echo, parroting his beliefs to make sure she was never in the line of fire. Sometimes she'd even join in when he made fun of my love for books, her nervous, high-pitched laugh a desperate shield to avoid becoming his next target. My older brother, Marcus, was the golden child. He dropped out of high school in his junior year to follow our dad to the mill. Now that's a true Thompson. Dad would boom at holiday gatherings, clapping Marcus on the back so hard he'd stumble. No time for that book nonsense, just good, honest work. Marcus soaked up this praise like a sponge, becoming a perfect copy of our father in both his opinions and his quick temper. By the time he was 20, he had his own apartment and a respectable paycheck, achievements my parents lauded as the absolute height of success. I, on the other hand, figured out young that I was different. I loved to learn. Words were like intricate puzzles. Numbers concealed hidden patterns I was desperate to solve. I'd lose hours conducting my own little science experiments in the kitchen, only to have my dad storm in, yelling about me wasting good food on my foolishness. The first person to see something in me was my 3rd-grade teacher. Mrs. Gable Rebecca has a remarkable analytical mind, she told my parents at a conference they only attended because it was mandatory. Dad just stared at a spot on the wall, and Mom nodded vaguely, both of them having forgotten her words by the time we got back to the car. In 5th grade, I won the district spelling bee. A small article, complete with my picture, appeared in the local paper. I was beaming, clutching the certificate as my friends' parents took photos. Mine weren't there. Had to work overtime, Dad said later. But then I heard him telling Marcus it was absurd to celebrate someone for knowing how to spell words any normal person could just look up in a dictionary. In 7th grade, my science project analyzing the water quality of our local streams won a state-level award. The principal himself called our house to deliver the news. My mom answered and just said, "Oh, that's nice," in the same flat tone she used for the weather report. When I asked if they could drive me to the state competition, a 2-hour trip, Dad just laughed. "We're not wasting a full tank of gas for you to play make-believe scientist. That's not going to put a roof over anyone's head. High school was my refuge, the one place I could actually breathe." The final bell of the day wasn't an ending for me. It was a beginning. I threw myself into every academic club I could find, debate, mathletes, the school newspaper. I'd stay in the library until the janitors started turning off the lights, soaking in the quiet hum of the fluorescent bulbs, putting off the moment I'd have to walk back through the front door of my own house and become small again. My English teacher, Mr. Davies, saw my hunger and loaned me books from his own shelf. "You have an exceptional mind, Rebecca," he told me one afternoon. "Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise." My math teacher, Miss Chen, stayed after school with me for weeks, coaching me for my advanced placement exams. "College is going to open up a whole new world for you," she'd say, her encouragement a lifeline. When I was named valedictorian, the principal called my parents personally to invite them to the graduation ceremony. They didn't come. Dad had a fishing trip with Marcus that he'd planned months ago. Mom said she was coming down with a migraine. I delivered my speech to a sea of strangers, blinking back tears as I watched other graduates get swept up in hugs by their beaming parents. I was standing alone in the crowd afterward when Mr. Davies walked up with a small wrapped box. Inside was a leather-bound journal. On the first page, he had written an inscription: "Your journey is just beginning. The world is waiting for your voice." That night, alone in my room, I made a silent vow. I was going to be the first Thompson to go to college. Not just any college, but the best one that would have me. Education wasn't just a passion anymore. It was my escape plan. Every dismissive comment from my family, every scoff and eye roll was just another brick in the foundation of my resolve. I began applying for scholarships in absolute secrecy. I used the computers in the school library since we didn't have internet at home. I created a secret email address and asked a trusted teacher to be my primary contact so no revealing mail would ever arrive at our house. While my friends were excitedly showing their college acceptance letters to their supportive families, I was hiding mine under a loose floorboard in my bedroom. At night, I'd pull them out and read them by flashlight, tracing the embossed logos of the universities with my finger. They were like treasure maps leading to a different life. The day I graduated, as other families celebrated with parties and gifts, my dad's only question to me was, "So you starting at the mill on Monday, right?" When I finally worked up the nerve to tell them I had received a full-ride scholarship to Northwood University, the silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. It lasted about 10 seconds before my dad suddenly hurled his dinner plate against the kitchen wall, where it shattered. "So you think you're too good for us now?" he roared. "Too good for honest work for your own family? Books and theories don't put food on the table, Rebecca. Real work does." My mom just stared down at her hands, and my brother Marcus, true to form, just laughed. "I always knew you were a weirdo," he said. That night, I packed my single suitcase with the few things I owned. I knew I was burning the only bridge I had, but as fear coiled in my stomach, every t-shirt and book I packed felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself they had never even bothered to see. My first day at college orientation felt like landing on a different planet. All around me, families were unloading minivans overflowing with dorm supplies. Mothers were meticulously making beds, while fathers wrestled with assembling cheap furniture. I arrived on a Greyhound bus, completely alone, with one suitcase and a backpack that held everything I owned in the world. The scholarship covered tuition and a basic room and board plan, but that was it. There was no money for extras, no laptop, no new clothes. "Are your parents coming later?" my new roommate, Jasmine, asked as her own mother cheerfully organized their shared closet. Her dad was busy setting up a mini fridge he'd brought as a surprise. "They had to work," I lied. It was the first of many lies I'd tell over the next 4 years, because the truth was just too raw, too complicated to explain to people whose parents hugged them goodbye, with tears of pride. That first semester was a brutal adjustment. Lacking a laptop, I had to spend countless late nights in the campus computer lab, typing out essays while other students worked from the comfort of their dorm rooms. The financial aid office found me a work-study job in the cafeteria, but the hours were few, and the pay only just covered absolute necessities, like soap and toothpaste. I got a second job waiting tables at a diner just off campus, working nights and weekends, all while desperately trying to keep up the high GPA my scholarship demanded. 3 weeks into my first October, my fragile budget shattered when I came down with a nasty case of strep throat. The copay for the clinic visit and the cost of the antibiotics wiped out the tiny savings I had. With no other choice, I swallowed my pride and called home. My mom answered, her voice instantly wary. "Is everything all right?" she asked, which was her code for, "Have you finally given up on this ridiculous college idea? I'm a bit tight on cash this month," I managed to say, explaining how I'd gotten sick and had to pay for a doctor's visit. I was just hoping maybe I could borrow $100, just until I get my next paycheck. There was a long, cold pause on the line before I heard my dad snatch the phone away. Having money trouble already? Welcome to the real world, little Miss University. Maybe this will teach you a thing or two about real responsibility. Then he just hung up. That night, with no money for my share of the dorm utilities bill and my medication, I slept in my car for the first time. Jasmine had family visiting, so I mumbled an excuse about staying with a friend from class. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a secret life, alternating between the cramped back seat of my 15-year-old Honda and the 24-hour campus library, using the gym showers before my morning classes. I became a ghost, just another exhausted student in a sea of thousands. No one ever noticed. When Thanksgiving rolled around, the campus emptied out. I took every extra shift I could get at the diner, earning double-time pay and surprisingly generous tips from patrons who pitied the poor college girl working on a holiday. With that money, I found a tiny, rundown studio apartment in a sketchy neighborhood off campus. It was cheaper than the dorms, and more importantly, it was all mine. Despite the constant struggle, I was thriving academically. My professors saw my drive and my genuine curiosity. Dr. Reed, my Intro to Psychology professor, became a pivotal mentor. After I turned in a paper analyzing the psychological effects of economic hardship on family structures, she asked me to stay after class. "This analysis, Rebecca, it shows an incredible depth of insight," she said, peering at me over her glasses. "Have you ever considered psychology as a major?" That one conversation changed everything. Psychology gave me a language and a framework to begin understanding my own life. The more I learned about family systems, attachment theory, and childhood resilience, the more the painful patterns of my own upbringing started to make a terrifying kind of sense. Knowledge was no longer just about escape, it was becoming a form of healing. By my sophomore year, I had fallen into a grueling but manageable rhythm. Classes in the morning, study sessions at the library in the afternoon, work shifts at night, and homework until the early hours of the morning. I lived on instant ramen, free food from campus events, and the occasional meal a professor would offer to buy me while we discussed a concept after class. I became an expert at survival, learning which campus buildings had the best heating in the winter and the most effective air conditioning in the summer to save on my own utility bills. In my junior year, I landed a research assistant position with Professor Grant, which paid far better than my diner job. He chose me out of dozens of applicants. Your perspective on the role socioeconomic factors play in family psychology is unusually sophisticated, he told me. Most undergraduates only have a textbook understanding of these things. If he only knew how deeply, personally I understood them. Every theory I studied shone a light on another dark corner of my family's dynamics. Every research paper I read gave me a name for things I had only ever felt. By senior year, I had discovered my true academic calling, studying how a child's family environment directly impacts their educational outcomes and their sense of self-worth. The irony was thick enough to taste. My own family, the people who tried to crush my ambition, had inadvertently become my greatest case study. I graduated summa cum laude with departmental honors. Several of my professors wrote glowing recommendations, urging me to apply to graduate programs. When the acceptance letter to the graduate program arrived, complete with a teaching assistantship that would cover most of my expenses, I felt a wave of pure vindication. I had done it. I had proven them all wrong. In a moment of foolish optimism, I called home to share the news. My mother answered, her voice sounding thinner and older than I remembered. "I got into the graduate program," I said, trying to keep the tremble of pride out of my voice. "It's fully funded, and I'll have a teaching position." There was a pause. "Oh," she finally said. "So? More school, then. When are you planning on getting a real job, Rebecca? This is a real job, Mom. I'll be teaching and conducting research." I could hear my dad's voice cut in. He must have been listening on the other line. So the perpetual student is still finding ways to avoid growing up. Some of us have been working since we were 16, but I guess that's beneath the future professor. I ended the call soon after, a cold reminder of why I had kept my distance in the first place. But some small, childish part of me had still held out hope for a crumb of approval, a simple acknowledgement that what I had done was worthwhile. That hope now felt as foolish as trying to draw water from a stone. Graduate school meant I needed to find cheap housing close to campus. My teaching stipend was enough for the basics, but just barely. After running the numbers over and over, I made a choice that felt both practical and deeply unsettling. I would rent a small apartment back in my hometown, a 20-minute commute from the university. The rent was a fraction of what it would be near campus. I told myself it was purely a financial decision, but looking back, I think a part of me still craved the family connection I'd never had, hoping that maybe this time things would be different. Graduate school was like my undergraduate life amplified to an extreme. The coursework was more intense, the expectations were higher, and the competition was sharper. But for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My years of struggle had forged a kind of resilience that my more privileged classmates were only just beginning to learn. My research focus sharpened, zeroing in on family psychology, specifically the impact of parental attitudes on a child's academic achievement and self-concept. Every paper I wrote, every study I designed revolved around this central theme, examining it through different theoretical lenses. My professors praised the unusual depth of my work. Most students approach these topics from a purely theoretical standpoint, Doctor. Anya Sharma commented on one of my drafts. "Your work demonstrates a remarkably nuanced understanding of the lived experience." She had no idea how personal my research really was. Every statistical correlation I analyzed was a reflection of my own childhood. Every case study I read echoed my own story. I was living a strange double life as both the researcher and the subject, a duality I carefully concealed behind academic jargon and rigorous methodology. About 3 months into the program, my fragile budget was shattered when my old car broke down, requiring major repairs I couldn't afford. The teaching stipend covered rent, utilities, and groceries, with nothing left over for an emergency like this. After trying every other possible solution, I reluctantly called my parents. "I need a place to stay for just a month or two while I save up for another car," I explained, hating the sound of my own vulnerable voice. "I can pay a little rent, I'll help with chores, and I'll be at the university most of the time anyway." To my absolute shock, they agreed with very little argument. My dad grumbled something about me coming back with my tail between my legs, but my mother seemed almost happy at the idea of me being home. Maybe, I thought with a dangerous flicker of hope, maybe time had softened them. Maybe seeing my dedication up close would finally earn me a sliver of their respect. The first week back was surprisingly calm. I cleared a corner in my old bedroom, which had become a storage space, and set up a small desk. I fell into a routine of leaving for campus before they woke up and coming home late, which kept our interactions to a minimum. My mom started leaving plates of food for me in the fridge, labeled with my name. My dad's commentary was limited to a few muttered asides about career students, but nothing I couldn't ignore. This fragile truce gave me the space to develop my thesis proposal. The topic was a natural extension of all my previous research: educational resilience in first-generation college students, an analysis of family dynamics and psychological coping mechanisms. My thesis committee was enthusiastic, and Dr. Sharma agreed to be my primary advisor, providing invaluable guidance as I began the intensive research phase. I dove into my work, conducting literature reviews, designing surveys, and getting approval for my human subjects research. I began conducting long, in-depth interviews with 20 other first-generation college students, and their stories were both heartbreaking and inspiring, adding rich, complex layers to my work. But as my work intensified, so did the tension at home. The subtle digs slowly escalated into a daily barrage of criticism about my obsession with school and pointed questions about when I would finally join the real world. My father developed a particular hatred for my laptop, which to him was a symbol of everything he despised. Staring at that glowing screen all day is going to rot your brain, he'd announce, before deliberately cranking the television volume to a deafening level whenever he saw me working. People who just type for a living are pretending to work. My mother fell back into her old role as his passive enforcer. "Your father just wants what's best for you," she'd say quietly after one of his tirades. "Maybe a simple office job would be better than all this stress. It would be simpler, as if I'd ever wanted a simple life. As if I hadn't spent my entire life fighting to escape the crushing simplicity they offered." My brother, Marcus, started showing up more often, always when I was in the middle of a complex thought. He'd just walk into my room without knocking, asking me pointless questions or loudly reminding me about some family obligation I had supposedly forgotten about. Every interruption was a battle, shattering my concentration and forcing me to waste precious time and energy trying to get back on track. Sleep became a memory. I started working through the dead of night when the house was finally quiet, catching just a few hours of sleep as the sun came up before heading back to campus. The exhaustion was a physical weight, but my resolve only hardened. Every petty obstacle they threw in my way became fuel for my fire. I would finish this thesis. I would prove, once and for all, that their narrow, suffocating vision of my life was wrong. About 6 weeks before my final deadline, Dr. Sharma reviewed my latest draft. Her feedback was critical and required a massive restructuring of my findings. "Your analysis is brilliant, Rebecca," she explained, "but you need to make the connections to your theoretical framework more explicit. They're all here, but you need to spell them out." This major setback coincided with a technical glitch that corrupted several of my backup files. I lost days of painstaking work, forcing me to reconstruct complex data analyses from memory and a mess of scattered notes. The pressure was immense. With every passing day, the deadline felt more and more like an impossible cliff face. The breaking point came one night when I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. I had crept downstairs for more coffee, desperate for the caffeine to get me through another all-night session. Their voices were low, but sharp. "She thinks she's so damn smart," my dad was saying, his voice thick with contempt. "All her books and her big words. What good is some fancy degree if you're 25 and still living with your parents?" Marcus had his own place when he was 19. "I worry about her," my mother replied, not in defense, but in agreement. All this education, and for what? No husband, no kids, just a bunch of papers no one will ever read. A waste, my dad concluded. Should have just gotten a job at the factory like a normal person. I backed away silently, their words like acid in my stomach. I went back to my room, but this time the hurt was replaced by a cold, clear rage. I worked for 20 hours straight, fueled by nothing but black coffee and pure fury. By the time the sun rose, I had rebuilt the lost data and implemented almost all of Dr. Sharma's revisions. My thesis was 90% done. I had 48 hours left. That morning, my dad began a new campaign of harassment, barging into my room every 30 minutes with some trivial demand or comment. My mom joined in, insisting I had to take a break to eat a meal I didn't want or help with some household chore that was suddenly urgent. "Your thesis will still be there tomorrow," she said, waving a dismissive hand when I tried to explain the deadline. "Family has to come first." The last 24 hours were a war of attrition. I moved my work to the dining room table to have more space for my notes. My dad immediately turned on the TV in the next room, blasting a sports game at full volume. I worked through the night, and as the first light of dawn filtered through the blinds, I was done with the revisions. All that was left was formatting and a final proofread. The deadline was noon. I was bone-tired, but filled with a sense of grim triumph. I had beaten them. The thesis was good, not just finished, but genuinely good. For the first time in weeks, I let myself feel a flicker of pride. And that's when my father walked into the dining room, coffee mug in hand, and my world fell apart. The sun was streaming in on the morning of my submission day, a deceptively peaceful start. I had been awake for nearly 36 hours, running on determination and bitter coffee. My eyes felt like they were full of sand, but a deep sense of accomplishment was holding the exhaustion at bay. In just a few more hours, nearly 2 years of my life would be submitted and finalized. I tiptoed to the kitchen, the house still silent, for what must have been my 5th cup. The clock on the microwave read 7:06 a.m., less than 5 hours until the noon deadline. All I had left was the final proofread, formatting the citations to strict academic standards, and bundling the submission package. It was tight, but I was going to make it. I had spread my work across the dining room table, with notes and reference books in organized stacks around my aging, second-hand laptop. It hummed along, the document containing my entire future open on its screen. The first inkling of trouble came at 7:30 a.m. when my father emerged from his bedroom, far earlier than usual on a day off. He stood in the kitchen doorway, his eyes narrowed as he surveyed my setup. "Still playing school, I see," he said, his voice dripping with that familiar contempt. "Real people are on their way to work right now." I took a breath, forcing myself not to react. "Just a few more hours. Don't take the bait." "Good morning, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I'll be done soon. It's due at noon." He just grunted and moved toward the coffee pot. Submission. Just a fancy word for homework. When I was your age, I was already supporting a family. I ignored the familiar jab and focused on my screen. Mom appeared next, her hair in rollers. She clucked her tongue at the papers on the table. "Rebecca, all this mess. We need to set the table for breakfast." "I just need a few more hours, Mom," I pleaded, trying to keep the rising desperation out of my voice. "This is it. This is the culmination of 2 years of work." "Work?" My dad scoffed from the kitchen. "Typing isn't work. Try hauling steel in 100-degree heat for 12 hours. That's work." My mom put a hand on my shoulder. To an outsider, it might have looked like a supportive gesture, but I felt the warning pressure in her fingers. "Surely you can take a little break for a family breakfast. We barely see you anymore." The irony was staggering. For weeks, they had done nothing but complain about my presence, and now, with my deadline hours away, family togetherness was suddenly a top priority. "I really can't stop now," I said firmly. "The formatting is very specific, and I need to concentrate." My dad walked back into the room, gripping his coffee mug. "Your mother asked you to clear the table. It wasn't a request, it was an order, laced with that dangerous edge I knew so well from my childhood. Still, I couldn't back down. Not now." "I'll eat later," I offered, trying to find a compromise. "You and Mom can eat at the kitchen counter. I just have to finish this." His face grew dark. "Ungrateful. This is what all that education gets you. Kids who think they're too good for their own family." Mom tried her usual weak attempt at peacekeeping. Arthur just let her finish her school project, but her words had no force, and we all knew it. He slammed his mug on the counter, coffee splashing over the side. "Project? She's 25 years old, playing with school projects while real adults are out earning a living." I tried to block him out, focusing on my screen. "Just keep working, don't engage." At 9:30, Marcus showed up, unannounced. "Family breakfast," he boomed, bursting through the door and dropping his keys noisily on the counter. He leaned over my shoulder. "Still plugging away at that paper? Thought you'd be done by now." "It's a thesis," I corrected him automatically. "And yes, I'm finishing it today," he chuckled. "Thesis, paper, whatever. By the way, did I tell you guys I got that promotion? Supervisor now, full benefits, pension, the whole deal." My dad's face lit up with a pride I had never ever seen directed at me. "That's my boy. Real work, real rewards. None of this school nonsense that goes on forever." The contrast was so sharp it was physically painful. I took a deep breath and went back to my citations. The next 2 hours were a master class in psychological warfare. Mom kept dusting the dining room. Dad kept turning up the TV volume. Marcus paced behind my chair, talking loudly on his phone. By 11:30, my nerves were shot, but I was on the verge of victory. The thesis was formatted, the citations were perfect, the abstract was polished. All that was left was to save it one last time and upload it to the university portal. I was going to make it, and that's when my internet connection died. The error message glowed on my screen. No connection available. I checked my phone. No service there either. With a growing sense of dread, I went to the living room where Dad was watching TV with a perfect Wi-Fi signal on his tablet. "The internet's out in the dining room," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I have to submit my thesis in the next 30 minutes. Can you check the router?" He didn't even look at me. "Works fine for me." "But it's not working on my laptop or my phone," I explained, the panic rising in my throat. "Please, Dad, this is critical. I have to submit by noon." He turned his head slowly, his expression blank. "Funny how these emergencies of yours always have to do with your schoolwork." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "Did you do something to the internet?" A small, smug smile touched the corner of his mouth. "My house, my internet. Maybe I put on some parental controls. Maybe the dining room is a no-computer zone now." Rage and desperation collided inside me. 2 years of work, my entire graduate career, all about to be destroyed by his petty, childish power trip. "I need to submit this thesis," I said, my voice trembling with the effort to stay calm. "This is my future, Dad." He laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. "Your future? That's a joke." He stood up, looming over me. "What future? Marcus has a house, a promotion, a real life. What do you have? A pile of papers and student debt." My mom appeared in the doorway, drawn by our raised voices, her silence a clear sign of her allegiance. "I need to get this submitted," I repeated, moving towards the router on a shelf. "I'll just reset it myself." His hand shot out and clamped around my arm, his grip like iron. "You don't touch anything in my house without my permission." "Let go of me," I said, trying to pull away. "This is insane. I just need 5 minutes of internet. Your work?" He sneered. "You mean your excuse to act like you're better than the rest of us?" Suddenly, everything became crystal clear. "This was never about my education, was it?" I said. The truth of it breaking through the panic. "This has always been about your own insecurity. You can't stand that I chose a different life." His face contorted in a mask of pure rage. "You ungrateful little—" And that's when I did the one thing that was never allowed in our house. I cut him off. "Number, I'm not ungrateful. I'm ambitious. I'm determined. And I am not going to let you sabotage my future just because you're too small-minded to understand it." I turned my back on him and walked to the dining room to grab my laptop. I would drive to campus, even if it meant missing the deadline. I had to try. I heard his heavy footsteps behind me. I reached my laptop just as he stormed into the room. "You think you're so much smarter than everyone?" he said, his voice dangerously low. "Better than your own family because of your precious education." I didn't answer, focused only on getting my things. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," he demanded. When I ignored him, he slammed his hand on the table. I said, "Look at me." I turned, clutching the laptop to my chest like a shield. "You need to learn some respect. You need to learn your place." "My place," I replied, the truth of it ringing in the air, "is not here." It never was. That's when something broke in his eyes. A final restraint snapped. "Your future," he repeated, his voice chillingly calm. "That's a joke." His hand shot out, not to grab me, but to grab my laptop. For a split second, I thought he was just going to take it, to hide it. But then, with a roar of pure, incandescent rage, he ripped it from my hands. I watched in horror as he raised it high over his head. Our eyes met, and I saw nothing in his but cold, deliberate fury. He brought the laptop down with brutal force against the side of my head. The impact was an explosion of white-hot pain. The corner of the device hit me just above my temple, and I felt the skin split. The blow sent me staggering backward into the wall. As my vision tunneled, I saw the laptop crash to the floor, the screen cracking and separating from the keyboard. 2 years of my life shattered. "You don't deserve a future," my dad snarled, standing over me as I slid down the wall. "You're just a leech." And then came the most horrific sound of all: laughter. My mother, standing in the doorway, was laughing. It was a high, nervous giggle, as if he just told a bad joke instead of assaulting their daughter. "Arthur," she finally said, still chuckling, "that's enough now." Blood was running into my eye. My future was in pieces on the floor, and this was just enough now. He stood over me, his chest heaving, before turning and walking away. My mom followed. I could hear them in the kitchen, the clink of coffee cups, the refrigerator door opening and closing, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just crossed a line from which there was no return. I stayed on the floor, stunned, the pain in my head pulsing with my heartbeat. When I finally touched my temple, my fingers came back slick with blood. Nausea and dizziness washed over me, a concussion. I shakily gathered the broken pieces of my laptop. The screen dangled by a wire. The power button was dead. The machine holding my entire academic life was gone. My thesis, the deadline. Panic cut through the pain. I had to get the data. I stumbled to the bathroom. The mirror showed a deep, inch-long gash above my right temple, bleeding freely. I pressed a washcloth to it. The room spun. I knew I needed to go to an ER, but the deadline was a bigger emergency. It was past 11. I went back to the dining room. Frank was there now, sitting at the table, scrolling on his phone. "Dad really got you good," he said without looking up. Should have known not to talk back. The casual acceptance of it was more chilling than the attack itself. This was just normal to them. "I need my thesis files," I said, my voice hollow. "Do you have a computer I can use? It's due at noon." He laughed. "Still worried about homework after Dad just clocked you? Your priorities are screwed up, sis." "Please," I begged, hating myself for it. "It's my graduate thesis. It's everything." He finally looked up and shrugged. "Sorry, my laptop's at home. Besides, that thing's toast. You're not getting anything off it." I knew he was right. I grabbed the broken machine in my bag. My mom appeared in the doorway. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked, as if I were a teenager breaking curfew. "To the hospital, then to campus." I couldn't look at her, the woman who laughed while I bled. "Your father's still upset," she said in a low voice. "Maybe you should wait. Apologize for provoking him." Apologize? For what? For wanting an education? For my own father splitting my head open? "I'm not apologizing," I said, my voice suddenly steady, "and I'm not staying." "Don't be so dramatic, Rebecca," she sighed. "It was just an argument that got out of hand." "This wasn't an argument, Mom. This was assault." Her face hardened. "Now you're just being ridiculous. Your father would never—" "He just did," I said, gesturing to my bleeding head. "Look at me." She glanced at my injury with the detachment of a stranger. "You'll probably need a few stitches. I can take you to urgent care after lunch." After lunch? The world was ending, and she was talking about lunch. "I'm leaving," I said again, "and I'm not coming back." From the living room, my dad's voice boomed. "If you walk out that door, don't you ever bother coming back." My mom gave me a look that was both pleading and blaming. "See what you started?" Just apologize, and this will all be over. In that single moment, I saw it all with perfect, horrifying clarity. The abuser and the enabler, a perfect system of control. I had been trying to escape my whole life, but some pathetic hope for their love had always kept me tethered to them. No more. "Goodbye, Mom," I said and walked past her. "You'll regret this," she called after me. "When your fancy education leaves you all alone, you'll wish you had chosen blood over books." I didn't look back. Clutching my broken laptop, blood still running down my face, I walked out into the blinding sun, my future shattered, but for the first time, completely my own. I drove without a destination, my thoughts a chaotic swirl of pain and shock. The washcloth was soaked, and the throbbing in my head was getting worse. I pulled into an empty park and let myself break. I cried for the little girl whose spelling bee trophy was a joke, for the teenager hiding acceptance letters under her floorboards, for the daughter who had craved a single drop of approval from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. A sharp ping from my phone cut through the sobs. An email from Dr. Sharma. "Rebecca, noon deadline is approaching. Please confirm your submission status." Reality hit me like a ton of bricks. It was 11:28 a.m. I was in a park, bleeding with a destroyed laptop. It was over. Then something inside me shifted. A strange, cold calm settled over the panic. If my family taught me anything, it was how to survive impossible odds. This was just one more obstacle. I found a tissue in my glove box and pressed it to the gash. I typed a reply to Dr. Sharma. "Emergency situation. Heading to campus now. Will advise." Her response was instant. "What kind of emergency? Are you okay?" I decided on the absolute truth. Physical injury requiring medical attention. Laptop destroyed. Cannot access thesis files. Will explain in person. I started the car. Her reply came before I'd left the parking lot. "Go directly to University Health Services. I will meet you there. Do not worry about the thesis right now. Your safety is what matters." Her immediate concern, so starkly different from my family's, brought fresh tears to my eyes. When I stumbled into the health center, the receptionist took one look at me and rushed me into an exam room. A kind, efficient nurse named Linda cleaned the wound as I told her the whole surreal story. "My father smashed my laptop against my head," I said, the words sounding like they belonged to someone else. Her hand stilled for a second. "This injury is consistent with that," she said carefully. "I'm going to document everything. The doctor will be in to see if you need stitches and to assess you for a concussion." "I had a thesis deadline," I mumbled. "At noon." "Your health is the priority," Linda said firmly. "Deadlines can be extended for documented medical emergencies. This more than qualifies." Dr. Sharma arrived just as the doctor was confirming I had a mild concussion and needed 4 stitches. "My God, Rebecca," she breathed, her professional composure gone. "What happened?" The doctor explained the situation and the concussion protocol. No screens, limited cognitive strain for at least 48 hours. "Of course, doctor," Sharma agreed instantly. "The deadline is waived. We'll figure out an extension once you're recovering." While the doctor stitched my wound, Doctor, Sharma sat beside me. "Rebecca," she said gently, "can you tell me what happened?" For the second time, I recounted the morning's events. When I finished, she took a deep breath. "First," she said, "your thesis is not lost. You sent me a draft 2 days ago. We have that version." Relief washed over me so powerfully I felt dizzy. In the chaos, I'd forgotten. "Second," she continued, her voice firm, "what happened to you is a crime. It's assault. We need to report this. The campus police office is right next door. Would you be willing to speak with them?" He had crossed an irreversible line. I had to as well. "Yes," I said. "I'll report it." The next few hours were a blur. The doctor finished the stitches. A campus police officer took my statement, photographed my injury, and took my shattered laptop as evidence. A student services coordinator arranged for emergency housing in a graduate apartment, since going home was impossible. And through it all, Doctor. Sharma stayed by my side, a fierce advocate navigating the university bureaucracy for me. She secured an emergency extension and arranged for IT to attempt data recovery. The graduate dean approved a 2-week extension, she told me later, and I thinks they might be able to salvage the hard drive. It looks intact. I don't know how to thank you, I whispered, completely overwhelmed. You don't have to, she said. This is what an academic community is for. We support each other, ensuring you can finish your work after this. It's the absolute least we can do. Community, support. Concepts that had always been foreign to me were now my reality. That evening, she walked me to my temporary apartment. Before she left, she handed me a business card for the University Counseling Center. What you've been through is deeply traumatic, Rebecca, she said. Please consider calling them. After she was gone, I sat on the edge of the strange bed, my head throbbing. I thought of the crash of metal and plastic, of my mother's laughter. I picked up the card and my phone. Some burdens were too heavy to carry alone. The next morning, an IT tech knocked on my door holding a small external hard drive. We got it, he said with a smile. Almost all of your files. The hard drive was surprisingly resilient. I took it with trembling hands. Thank you, I said. You have no idea. I plugged it into the loaner laptop student services had provided, and there it was, my thesis, intact. An email dinged moments later. Thesis received, submission recorded. Those 5 words were my victory. Despite everything, I had succeeded. The future they said I didn't deserve was still mine. As I closed the laptop, I realized something profound. The family that should have been my foundation had tried to be my wrecking ball, but in doing so, they had inadvertently forged me into someone who could withstand the impact. My next call was to the university's legal aid office to file a restraining order. Some bridges don't just need to be burned, they need to be obliterated. The physical scar on my temple faded over time, but the emotional healing was a longer journey. The concussion symptoms lingered for weeks, and my twice-weekly counseling sessions became an essential part of my recovery, helping me unpack a lifetime of abuse. A month later, I successfully defended my thesis. Highest honors, unanimous decision, Doctor, Sharma announced. The words were validating, but the true victory was internal. I had survived, and I had thrived. The restraining order was granted. My parents didn't even show up, sending a lawyer's statement that I was prone to exaggeration. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, found their response concerning. That summer, Doctor. Westfield offered me a research position to expand upon my thesis work. As I was settling into my new campus apartment, Marcus appeared at my office door, looking uncertain. "Can we talk?" he asked. I hesitated. "I'm not here to defend them," he said quickly. "What Dad did, it was wrong. Seriously wrong. The admission was stunning. They're telling everyone you fell," he continued, looking at the floor. "I'm not going along with it anymore." He put a box on my desk. To replace what was broken, inside was a new, high-end laptop. "A laptop doesn't fix it," I said softly. "I know," he admitted. "I've been thinking a lot about how they treated you, praising me for breathing while tearing you down for being brilliant. It wasn't fair." His insight was a seismic shift. "Will you keep in touch?" he asked as he left. "Not with them, just with me." "We can try," I said, slowly. It was a start, a chance to rebuild a single-family connection on my own terms. My research position evolved, and I began running outreach programs for other first-generation students from difficult backgrounds. Family resistance often says more about their own fears and limitations than it does about you, I'd tell them, transforming my own pain into a tool to help others. A year after the assault, I presented my research at a national conference. The standing ovation was gratifying, but the real reward was the line of students who came up afterward to share their own stories, their eyes filled with a recognition I understood all too well. My parents remained unchanged, stuck in their narrative of being the victims of an ungrateful daughter. I realized their cruelty was never really about me. It was about them. My success was a mirror they couldn't stand to look into, so they tried to shatter it. They failed. 2 years later, I hung my framed graduate degree on the wall of my own apartment. My phone chimed. It was Dr. Sharma. Curriculum Committee approved your new course on family dynamics and educational resilience for next semester. Congratulations, Professor Thompson. I smiled. Professor Thompson. The future they tried to beat out of me was here. Every obstacle they created had only made me stronger. The greatest lesson wasn't about trauma. It was about the power to alchemize pain into purpose. You can't choose the family you're born into, but you can choose the person you become and the family you build. Have you ever faced resistance from the very people who were supposed to be in your corner? How did you find the will to keep going after your goals when they tried to hold you back? I would be honored to read your own stories in the comments section. If my experience spoke to you, I'd appreciate it if you'd like this video, subscribe to the channel, and maybe share it with someone who needs a reminder that their value isn't defined by the people who refuse to see it. Thanks for being here for my story. And never forget, sometimes the most valuable lesson toxic people teach us is giving us a crystal clear picture of everything we never want to be.